TFA fam, welcome back in. We're on to week 15, which means the fantasy playoffs are upon us. Road to the championship is here. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into some of our favorite week 15 wide receivers for this week. And let's start off with our wide receiver ones, and they are as follows. AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, Michael Pittman, Deebo Samuel, Mike Evans, DK Metcalf, Puka Nacua, and Brandon Ayuk wraps up our top 12 wide receivers this week. Cody, hit us with some of those wide receiver ones.
Yeah, like the past couple of weeks, if you have any of these guys, I'm not going to dive into too much detail with the wide receiver ones. If you have any of them, you're starting them. Obviously, we have to watch with the Tyreek Hill injury. It was good to see him come back in the second half. I, for one, was sitting there just absolutely distraught and just ready to give up on everything when I saw him go out, because I have him on a couple playoff squads. But nonetheless, came back, but we still need to monitor that. We have him here at 3 going up against the Jets. 2 other receivers I just want to throw out really quickly here for the wide receiver ones. Going to be the Rams receivers. Love the spot for Puka and Cooper Kupp going up against the Commanders, who have allowed the second most half PPR points per game. It does put a little point chasey throwing Cooper Kupp back up into the wide receiver 1 mix after he was absolutely unstartable for the better part of like the past month and a half. But I will say that he did look the best he has since his first 2 games back in weeks 5 and 6. Kupp has seen 18 targets the past 2 weeks as well, and this matchup is as good as it gets. So he is back into the wide receiver 1 range for me.
All right, I don't have a whole lot to bring up here with the wide receiver ones. So let's move over to the wide receiver 2s, and they are Jamar Chase, DJ Moore, Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, Chris Olave, Keenan Allen, Zay Flowers, Devonta Smith, Cortland Sutton, DeAndre Hopkins, Jalen Waddle, and Garrett Wilson. Cody, hit us with some of these wide receiver 2s.
So the 2 main things here to watch out for as far as our wide receiver 2 rankings go is going to be Justin Jefferson. Obviously, he had that literal hospital ball thrown up to him. Seems like he has a chance to play. I'm a little bit lower on him this week because it does seem like it's going to be Nick Mullins at under center, with Josh Dobbs being benched in the second half of that game against the Raiders. But that's one to watch. And the other one is going to be Keenan Allen. He has missed back-to-back practices. This is a team that's out of it, has nothing to play for. So even if he does play, we're also going to be dealing with Easton Stick. So, and just a side note while we're talking about all these backup quarterbacks, the fact that the NFL wants to expand like beyond the teams that we have now just absolutely boggles my mind. Like, we don't have 32 good quarterbacks as it is. Anyway, that's a whole discussion for another day. But let's go ahead and talk about some of these guys that I am excited about. Devontae Adams, he has not been good this year, especially considering where you drafted him. He only has 5 finishes inside the top 24 in half PPR scoring. But having said that, I do like the spot going up against the Chargers we were just talking about, who are allowing the 4th most half PPR points per game to opposing wideouts. Adams is still 5th among wide receivers in target share. He's 3rd in weighted opportunity rating. He's 8th in deep targets, 2nd in red zone targets. So the usage is certainly there and, is up to snuff in terms of what we would expect from Devontae Adams. The fantasy points haven't followed, but I do think we see him finish as a high-end wide receiver 2 in week 15. I also really like this spot for Devonta Smith and just the Eagles in general, but the Seahawks are allowing the 6th most half PPR points per game to wide receivers. And I think with the way that the past 2 games have gone for Philadelphia, they're going to go out and just try and lay the hammer down on Seattle. So Smitty is really intriguing here for me. Even with Dallas Goedert being back, I know obviously we get a little bit more excited about Devonta Smith when Goddard is out of the lineup, but I like him here nonetheless. Moving on, Cortland Sutton is in a nice spot here in week 15, and he's kind of been like a discount Michael Pittman in terms of just how consistent he has been, especially over Cortland Sutton's last 7 games. He has finished as wide receiver 17 or better in 5 of those 7. He only has 1 wide receiver 1 week on the year, but now he gets a matchup against Detroit, who's allowing the 9th most fantasy points per game. Even better is the fact that they are tied for the 3rd most touchdowns given up to wide receivers, which is where Sutton has been making his fantasy hay all season. He has a touchdown in all but 3 games. And then lastly, Jaden Reed, another great spot here going up against Tampa Bay, who just bled points to opposing pass catchers all year. Reed's day against the Giants was saved by the rushing touchdown, but he did see 10 targets, although he turned that into 8 for 27 on some Alvin Kamara type shit out there. But again, the matchup is great. It does not seem positive for Christian Watson to make it back either. Even if he were to return, I would still be keeping Jaden Reed kind of in the spot as a back-end wide receiver too.
A couple other names I just want to mention. Zay Flowers has actually been really good over the last 4 weeks. He's actually scored 17.1 PPR points over that span. He is starting to look more and more explosive. They're starting to utilize him a little bit differently. They're still utilizing him on 28% on screens and design type passes behind the line of scrimmage. So it is a little frustrating. I wish they would really open up his route tree a little bit more. But Zay Flowers in a nut spot against the Jaguars. The Jaguars have been dreadful against the pass this year. Dreadful. I mean, we have seen them make Jake Browning and Joe Flacco look like MVPs type quarterbacks. So Lamar Jackson and this passing offense should be able to torch the Jaguars defense on Sunday Night Football. So I really like Zay Flowers. Odell Beckham's also in a really solid spot. And then Cortland Sutton, you mentioned, the Detroit Lions passing game or their pass defense has been so bad, so incredibly bad, especially over the last 6 weeks. They've allowed the most explosive plays of 20-plus yards. And Cortland Sutton, what do they utilize him for? Deep balls. And so Cortland Sutton is in a very, very good spot this week, as well as somebody you mentioned. So I did want to mention that. Let's go ahead and move over to the wide receiver threes really quickly. And it's Jaden Reed, Rashee Rice, Calvin Ridley, Terry McLaurin, Drake London, Brandon Cooks, Tyler Lockett, Odell Beckham, Amari Cooper, Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, and T. Higgins wrapping up our top 36 wide receivers this week. So, Cody, hit us with those wide receiver threes.
Just to build off what you were saying with Zay Flowers, I was going to talk about Odell Beckham here in the wide receiver threes. Not a name I thought we were going to be talking about, but here we are. Odell posted his second 90-plus yard performance in the last 3 weeks. His 54% snap share that he saw back in Week 14 was his highest since Week 8. Now it gets a matchup, like you said, against the Jags, who've just been an absolute pass funnel all year. The only thing you would worry about with Odell is if the Ravens jump out to a quick lead and they kind of just like park the bus here. But other than that, I still think Odell is a fine wide receiver 3/flex play. Tyler Lockett had his best fantasy day this past week since Week 10, where he had a soft matchup against the Commanders. He gets another soft matchup here against Philly. Like I said earlier with Devonta Smith, I think the Eagles come out and just try to absolutely crush and throttle Seattle, which will obviously force the Seahawks into a negative game script. So Lockett could be looking at double-digit targets in this one. Obviously we hope that Geno Smith would be back, but if it's Drew Lock, he was at least passable for fantasy purposes. Some guys I just wanted to highlight that I'm a little bit lower on than in previous weeks: Drake London and Amari Cooper. London absolutely balled this past week. He was someone that we talked about all week as one of our favorite plays, and he came through with that. But now it gets a matchup against the Panthers, who are surprisingly allowing the 5th fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers. This is also the same matchup in Week 1, where London saw just 1 target. I'm obviously not expecting anything along those lines, but if you were hoping for a repeat performance from Drake London this one, I'd pump the brakes there a little bit because they have been good. They did get torched by Mike Evans a couple of weeks ago, but other than that, they've been pretty solid for the majority of the year. Amari Cooper, we saw him get peppered with targets, had 14 last week, but now is going to get a matchup against one of the best defenses the past couple of weeks in the Chicago Bears. They held the Lions in check last week. Now they're going to get old man Flacco, who's been playing really well, but this certainly is not the matchup for him. And on the other side of that, Adam Thielen has kind of turned back into a pumpkin compared to how he was playing in the beginning of the year. But in this matchup, I think you can go back to him. They have been giving some production up to slot receivers, and that's obviously where Thielen is going to be playing. So that's where I have the wide receiver threes this week.
One other wide receiver that I do think we need to monitor this week is also going to be Nico Collins. He's not listed here in the top 36, but that's mainly because of that injury that he suffered last week. We're really not sure what's going to happen there. He only played the first snap. I do wonder if some of that was precaution, especially playing on that surface. The jet at MetLife is just dreadful. I mean, that field is so bad, and they need to do something about it. And I don't know if he tweaked something, because it was one play and he was out, and like they were like, "Nope, you're out." And so we haven't really heard anything else other than that. Like, there's been really no mention of him. But also, there's also the factor of is even CJ Stroud going to play this week? Because if Stroud doesn't play, then you can't be excited about Nico Collins because you're talking about Davis Mills out there, chucking the rock. So that is one situation, which is a shame because Nico Collins has been a baller this year. I mean, it has a major breakout season, just went over 1,000 receiving yards. So hate to see that, but I did want to bring him up, and that's why he's not on here because right now we just don't know. If both of them were to play, then obviously I think he's probably top 15 wide receiver this week in this matchup against the Titans. But without knowing for sure what's going to happen, so we erred on the side of caution. But is there any other wide receivers outside of the top 36 you want to talk about?
A little bit further down the list, Curtis Samuel always in play, especially in full PPR leagues where we're expecting the Commanders to be playing from behind. That's where Curtis Samuel has kind of been coming into his own over the past couple of weeks, getting healthy from that injury that he suffered in the middle of the season. But he's on the flex radar. You were talking about the Texans situation. I think Noah Brown should be paid attention to. Obviously, we want CJ Stroud to be under center. But even if it's Davis Mills, if we have no Nico Collins, obviously Tank Dell is going to be out. I think Noah Brown is at least in the dart throw type of conversation going up against the Titans, who have allowed the 8th most half PPR points per game to the position. Jackson Smith and Jigba has actually led the Seahawks in targets the past two in back-to-back weeks, although it hasn't amounted to much in terms of fantasy production. But this is another spot where he should be involved going up against the Eagles as 4-point home underdogs. And lastly, Romeo Dobbs are in play again despite Jordan Love's poor performance last week. This is a bounce-back spot going up against the Bucs. So I think you could go back to those receivers, again, assuming that Christian Watson is out. And I don't think it looks too good for him to be able to play in this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple other ones you could probably look at. George Pickens, I don't love it, but it is a decent matchup against the Colts. Their secondary is beatable. I think also another situation here could be Quentin Johnston. I mean, at some point, if Keenan Allen can't play, you don't have Josh Palmer, and I know it's Easton Stick, but I mean, he did hit him on that 57-yard really dime to him on this past Sunday. So, maybe Quentin Johnston to see some just massive workload, to see he's like 15 targets, and he just gets you there through volume. But Quentin Johnston, I think, especially if Keenan Allen were to miss, obviously we're going to know all this because they play on Thursday night. But if that were to happen, then at least, he is somebody that you could look at. I think Wan'Dale Robinson's also another option. I mean, with the way that Tommy DeVito has been playing out there, I think you got to take a look at him. So it's making this passing offense at least functional and allowing you to get to them. I mean, Wan'Dale Robinson had some really nice plays. And I think Jalen Hyatt is like a super deep league guy that you could take a look at. I think it's probably a little bit too thin on that one. Michael Wilson's the other one that I wanted to hit on. He sounds like he should be returning this week. We've been kind of waiting for it for him to return with Kyler Murray, but I think he'd be a big boost to this passing offense with Trey McBride as well. But at least somebody that I want to stash in case in case he really goes off, because I think that that could actually really be there for both those guys. He's going to play a ton of snaps as well. Probably go back to being the starting wide receiver on the outside. So I think Michael Wilson was also good. So that being said, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button for future content. We'll hit you on the next one. Bye.